Welcome to part 2, where the mysteries will be revealed, and our friendship will be tested to its ultimate limits. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey. He never told me about why he was on the streets. Instead, he always changed the subject back to me. I didn't realize how self-centered I was until I spilled my entire life story to him, and when he opened up about himself, I started talking about myself once again. In a way, I think I saw it like a competition. Oh, your life is bad. Well, this happened to me. I waited for him to get frustrated or angry, but he just listened. He always listened. It was snowing when the two of us sat shivering on a wall, our legs dangling. I don't remember whose genius idea it was to sit in sub-zero temperatures, but I remember enjoying the icy breeze on my face. Everything was covered in white. I don't think I should have enjoyed snow. It was extremely fucking easy to freeze to death in these conditions. But it was also snow. And I was still a stupid kid. I still liked snow. Charlie was, as usual, being his chipper self. He scored us a pack of chips to share, so we were passing it back and forth. My hands were so numb I couldn't even feel the chips. I just stuffed them in my mouth. Do you believe in angels, Finn? That question caught me off guard. Charlie's gaze was glued to a little girl perfecting a snow angel in front of us. The answer was no. I didn't believe in God. Any gods. Any religion. If God existed, or the angels, my parents wouldn't have kicked me out for liking guys. In the earlier days, I prayed for help. I had the stupid idea that my mom would actually hunt me down and take me back home. But God didn't exist, at least not to me, and I was tired of pretending. I didn't respond to Charlie, and his head dropped onto my shoulder. I jerked back, swallowing a hiss. I shoved him away, and for the first time since I'd met him, his smile started to fade. Sorry, he muttered, rubbing his hands together. Charlie seemed to notice our proximity, shuffling away from me. He said I was warm, and I hated myself for shouting at him. Because he was fucking warm too. I liked the feeling of his head on my shoulder. He felt safe and warm, and the closest thing I had to a home. I jumped off the wall, making an excuse to distance myself. I think I told him I was going to the shelter to try to find warm clothes from the lost and found. Charlie didn't reply, only jerking his head in a nod. He told me he'd be right there when I got back, and his words settled my twisting gut, the growing lump in my throat. I used my time away from him to come to terms with my feelings, and instead of pushing them away, like I had done for so long, suppressing and fucking swallowing them down, I realized I wanted Charlie to stay with me. Charlie was home. I had barely known this kid for a few months, and yet with him, I didn't feel cold anymore. I went back to the wall, ready to apologize to Charlie, but to my surprise, he was gone. I figured he'd gone searching for food since it was almost around dinner time, so I waited. I waited until the sky was dark, and I was so fucking cold, my bones ached. I noticed an old man who was playing chess with pigeons earlier. Charlie had pointed him out, laughing at one particular pigeon, who seemed too self-aware. I hurried over to him. Did you see me earlier? I twisted around, pointing at the wall the two of us sat on. The man nodded. Oh, you're looking for your friend? He slid another chess piece across the board. I believe he walked away with a man a few hours ago now. What man? I felt like I was going to puke. I asked him to describe the guy, but the old man shrugged. I have bad eyes, kid. It was just a man. Late 40s, I think. His expression softened when my stomach crawled into my throat. Are you all right? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sour candy, dropping it into my hand. You should go home now, kid. I'm sure your parents are worried about you. Again, I asked him to describe this man, this time through my teeth. But the old guy just turned back to his one-man chess game. I think part of me was in denial. I went back to our sleeping spot, expecting Charlie to be there, already comfortable in his sleeping bag, talking about optimistic BS. But he wasn't. I ran back to the shelter with his name choked in my mouth. I was living my own personal nightmare. Being snatched into the night, and nobody even knowing my name. I just got weird looks, kids looking progressively more freaked out. I wouldn't accept it at first. Charlie could have been anywhere. But the longer I waited for him in all of our spots, it became clear that Charlie was just another missing street kid who was there 1 minute, and gone the next. He was another Ben. Another Carly. But this time, I made the mistake of getting to know him. He was more than a name. Charlie was my friend. I asked strangers if they'd seen him. Passers-by looked me up and down like I was dirt on their shoe. These people had places to be. They didn't care about some faceless kid disappearing from the street. I already knew what they were thinking when they offered pitiful smiles, and said things like, "Sorry, I don't know. I can't help you, kid. I'm sure he's out there somewhere." They were wondering why Charlie was sleeping rough in the first place. Why he didn't just get help. I'm going to tell you the hardest thing I've come to realize. It's easy to be numb on the streets. Easy to shut down. Easy to forget to mourn, because it was too fucking cold. I didn't forget about Charlie, but I did bury him, so I wouldn't forget how to survive. So, a month later, I thought I was fucking hallucinating when I saw that all too familiar jacket, the one I told him multiple times to keep out of sight. It was snowing again, and it was thick and wet, clinging to my jeans. I was trying to find a patch of concrete free of snow to dump my sleeping bag. I scored hand warmers from one kid who was nice enough to offer them for a DS I'd found. There he was. Somehow. Charlie was standing in the middle of an empty road, in dead of night. I didn't question why or how. I just hugged him, mentally promising myself I would never let him go again. Charlie was so warm. His coat was thicker, and his backpack was nowhere to be seen. "Where did you go?" I demanded, shoving him back. Charlie just smiled, and I noticed his pocket, an iPhone sticking out. I think I was about to laugh, wondering just how he'd managed to get an iPhone, when a clammy hand suddenly clamped over my mouth. Warm arms wrapped around my torso and yanked me back. I screamed, but my cries were muffled, the hand clamping tighter until I couldn't fucking breathe. I remember being violently dragged back, my feet stumbling, my body struggling to stay upright. I was dragged halfway down the street, hoisted onto a stranger's shoulders, and dumped into the back of an awaiting van. It didn't feel like it was happening to me. All those nights I had nightmares about being the next kid snatched away. I never thought it would be me. I couldn't even cry out, my body felt paralyzed. I was dragged backwards through snow, and then I was on my knees on the ice-cold flooring of a van jerking left to right, staring at shutters being pulled down like I was an animal. I dived forward, but I was trapped. "I'm sorry, Finn," Charlie's voice pricked the silence. The back of the van was so cold, and the smell was already there, potent, a thick, rotting decay. "But you're the perfect body and shape for my father," he said, his voice deadpan and wrong. "I hope this doesn't change things between us," he whispered. His voice was different, taunting and cold, sending shivers down my spine. "We're still friends, right?" I fucking screamed at him. That bastard. He played the role so well, I should have fucking applauded him. I slammed my fists into the shutters, but the ignition came to life, and the van jerked forward, sending me stumbling back. I dropped to my knees, choking on the stink of decay. I didn't want to look. The light was too bright, too invasive, scorching the chill from my skin. I stayed on my knees until the smell got so bad, I had to fucking look. In front of me were bodies. Most of them were faceless, with no features, skin already crumbling from bones jutting out. One of them caught my eye, lying at the bottom of the pile. Ben. His skin was gray, dried blood staining his face, painting his clothes. I was already trying to roll him onto his front, so I didn't have to look at him. His eyes were open, like he was still alive. I shoved him onto his stomach, and something sour crawled up my throat, my stomach revolting. I thought I was seeing things. But no. When I reached forward, my fingers touched them, the twisted, feathery appendages protruding from twin slits cruelly sliced into a jutting spine. I shuffled back, a cry clawing from my throat. Wings. They were rotten, decaying, the wings of a bird, or something else, spliced with his flesh. I could see where his back had been cut open, all the way down his spine. Ben was dead. His wings were dying, festering inside a body that was ice-cold and alone, where he would never be found. That thought was quick to hit me. Just like me, Carly's short brown curls were buried under another corpse, a much younger kid. I could still see the pale blue of her coat, her yellow hat still frozen to her head. Carly had one singular wing sticking from her back, while the rest of her rotted away. I tripped over something, Carly's backpack. I could glimpse Jason's kicks sticking out from the pile. I couldn't look. They had names. They were real kids. Carly. Ben. Jason. They existed. Even if this world was so obsessed with fucking erasing them. Finn. Charlie's whisper slipped through the shutters. I held on to his voice, willing it to be him. Charlie. Do you believe in angels? He asked me once again. He still had that voice, that innocent, chipper tone I fell for. But there was an unmistakable twisting madness clinging to every word. I didn't respond. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. After a while, his voice stopped trying to get my attention. I just sat, freezing cold, my arms around my knees. I was going to fucking die. I kept looking at the kids who vanished, their bodies twisted and contorted into a cruel fantasy. The van stopped when I was falling asleep, jerking me awake. I heard footsteps outside. The shutters slid open, and in front of me, to my surprise, was a middle-aged woman. Her smile was kind, despite the gleam in her eye. She held out her arms, gesturing for me to come toward her. "It's okay, honey," she told me. "You're okay now." Charlie was standing next to her, his arms folded. "Careful," he muttered, nudging her. I saw his lip curl in disgust. Illuminated in the van's headlights, I saw who really was, a spoiled, psychotic kid playing with his toys. Charlie mockingly stepped back. "He might attack you." Behind him stood a towering man, holding a gun pointing it between my eyes. I had no choice, letting them pull me from the van. The man was quick to slip a shot into the back of my neck, which turned my body to lead. I was lifted into someone's arms. I remember they were warm. The last thing I remember is a bright light getting closer. I don't know how long I was out for. Long enough to get an actual, proper sleep. When I opened my eyes, I was staring at the sun peeking through gaps in a wooden door, my head turned at an awkward angle. It looked like I was in some kind of farmhouse. I could see piles of hay and horse shit in the corner. I was lying on my stomach, my wrists pinned down. The pain crept in slowly, at first a dull thud, before slamming into me, agonizing lightning bolts striking down my spine. So fucking painful, my vision blurred and feathered, losing focus. I've had sensory issues since I was a kid, and I could feel the entirety of my upper back had been split open. I could feel my own blood dripping down my skin, and something cruel and sharp forcing flaps of flesh apart. The thought of being cut open was enough to send me into fucking hysteria. I remember screaming until my throat was raw, until I passed out again. This time, it was a mercy. The pain wouldn't leave, pulling me into agony, and then letting me go. When I came around for the second time, I felt the ice-cold scalpel slicing into my back. But I didn't feel like I was cut open anymore. I felt a painful tugging when I tried to move. Stitches holding me together. "That's all finished," the man's voice sounded. "The body is almost ready." But when? That voice sent shivers creeping down my spine. Charlie. You said that last time, and the last 3 angels died, Dad. I could sense his rolled eyes. Admit that you're just killing them, and you have no idea what you're doing. I said he's ready, the man grumbled. So, let him fly. Charlie groaned. Come on, Dad, I want to see the angel fly. I was aware I was gasping into the cold surface of the surgical table. His stitches are still fresh, the man said. When he's ready, you can play with him. I was left alone after that. Hours. Then, a full day. But I wasn't hungry anymore. I wasn't thirsty. I didn't sleep. I was trying to find the best position to lie on my side, when footsteps startled me. The pain crept in slowly, at first a dull thud, before slamming into me, agonizing lightning bolts striking down my spine. So fucking painful, my vision blurred and feathered, losing focus. I've had sensory issues since I was a kid, and I could feel the entirety of my upper back had been split open. I could feel my own blood dripping down my skin, and something cruel and sharp forcing flaps of flesh apart. The thought of being cut open was enough to send me into fucking hysteria. I remember screaming until my throat was raw, until I passed out again. This time, it was a mercy. The pain wouldn't leave, pulling me into agony, and then letting me go. When I came around for the second time, I felt the ice-cold scalpel slicing into my back. But I didn't feel like I was cut open anymore. I felt a painful tugging when I tried to move. Stitches holding me together. That's all finished, the man's voice sounded. The body is almost ready. But when? That voice sent shivers creeping down my spine. Charlie. You said that last time, and the last 3 angels died, Dad. I could sense his rolled eyes. Admit that you're just killing them, and you have no idea what you're doing. I said he's ready, the man grumbled. So, let him fly. Charlie groaned. Come on, Dad, I want to see the angel fly. I was aware I was gasping into the cold surface of the surgical table. His stitches are still fresh, the man said. When he's ready, you can play with him. I was left alone after that. Hours. Then, a full day. But I wasn't hungry anymore. I wasn't thirsty. I didn't sleep. I was trying to find the best position to lie on my side, when footsteps startled me. After a single restless night on the street, I realized I couldn't fucking do it anymore. I ended up asking for help when the pain in my back kept me up at night. I could feel them physically trying to push through my skin, straining against my spine. I couldn't sleep on my back, or my side. The best sleeping position was lying on my stomach. Winter moved into spring, and I felt like I was dying. I couldn't eat, and I was weak. I think it was luck. Maybe a miracle. I walked into one of my old teachers. Mrs. W. She didn't ask about my situation, but she did offer a place to stay. That was the best thing about Mrs. W. No matter how much I knew she wanted to ask, she never invaded my privacy. She saw the scars on my back, saw me puke up everything I ate. But she didn't speak. Mrs. W. asked me if I wanted to share anything with her, and I said, no. If anyone knew what was inside my back, I'd be sliced open again. I was 19 at this point and I was tired and in too much pain to care about accepting handouts. Mrs. W. let me sleep in her spare room. She offered me food, but I could never eat it. I could only drink water, and even that was hard to stomach. She took me to the emergency room to get my back checked out, but after I suffered a panic attack at the thought of opening up to a doctor, she promised no hospitals. The pain got worse. It fucking laughed at medication. It got so bad, one night, I stood on the roof of Mrs. W.'s house, and let the pain take over, ripping through me, until something was splitting my spine, sending me to my knees. I could feel them coming through, breaking through my skin. They felt wrong and awkward, like additional limbs. I panicked, and with shaking hands, forced the twitching things back into twin slits. That did relieve the pain. I still couldn't eat or drink, but I started to feel human again. Mrs. W offered to send me back to school, and I did. I went back to finish high school. The eating/drinking thing got easier. I think my body just got used to it. After school, I got into community college, and Mrs. W helped me buy my first place. I grew up with the gnawing feeling that something wasn't right with me. The pain was still agonizing, and at times, I would have to rip open the stitches, and let them free. I've never once tried to figure them out, because I'm fucking terrified of them. I'm 29 now. I live far away from my hometown. I have a boyfriend, and an apartment, and I finally feel human again. Last night, I was waiting for a train home. It was freezing, and already, I could feel my back twitching, pain starting to gnaw at me. It's worse these days. Not just the pain. I'm sleepwalking. I'll find myself blocks away from my house, with no recollection of how I got there. I don't know why I'm no different from my teenage self. I still don't want to ask help, because whatever is inside me isn't fucking human. So, I kept my mouth shut. There was a homeless girl slumped in the corner of the platform. I've made it my goal. Whenever I see a homeless kid, I point them to the nearest shelter, and when they roll their eyes at me, I offer to take them there myself. I don't leave them until I know these kids are safe. Yes, they can be difficult. They're a lot more vocal these days. Kids hate authority figures. Especially authority figures that failed them. But I want to make it clear to them that they can ask for them. And their help. I was already halfway across the platform when I glimpsed familiar brown curls nestled under a green beanie. I knew it was him. He was wearing that exact same jacket, clinging to a wider frame. He was taller, his face more matured, with a 5 o'clock shadow, talking loudly on an expensive phone. I took my eyes off of the girl for 1 second. 1 second. I turned back to her, and she was gone. Just like that. When I searched the crowd, I caught her blonde ponytail behind her. A man pulling her through strangers. I started forwards, when someone pulled me back. No, Finn. Charlie's voice was in my ear, suddenly. She has the perfect shape and body for my father, he murmured. His voice kept me paralyzed, while the girl was getting further and further away, before becoming a speck, and then bleeding into nothing. I want to see you fly, Finn, Charlie whispered. I twisted around, and he was gone. When I left the train station, sitting on a bench was his old threaded backpack. Nothing inside, but I know why he left it. He's telling me he's watching me. Charlie is bragging that he's taking more kids right in front of me. I've looked everywhere for the girl, and I can't find her. When I asked a group of street kids, they were defensive, clearly not trusting me, before I warned them someone was kidnapping them. They told me 3 guys, and a girl, the blonde, have all vanished. I asked when, and that's when they started getting suspicious. They left without telling me, and I've spent the last week looking for these kids. The only way I'm going to find these kids is to find the sick bastard who took me. Before he does to them, what he did to Ben, Carly and Jason. And me. Finn stood there, in the deserted train station, with Charlie's old backpack on the bench. He knew that the fight was not over, and he would have to face his past to save other children from the horrific fate that he and his friends had endured.